Okay, cool. So another record that we're really into that I know both of us just have loved for many years and have been had all sorts of kind of personal um, touches with. I know in Nashville, I have some friends that know Steve Young, and he's just such kind of an unsung hero, I think, in the Americana world. I know you agree with that. His record there behind you, Honky Tonk Man, is one that I have in my collection as well on vinyl, and it's just a beautiful record and has that great kind of all analog. It just kind of has that sound of that era in terms of the just the fidelity of it, the way the drums sound, just kind of the whole thing sounds very live. And when you mentioned that you've been listening to that record recently again, um, I immediately remembered that track, "The Traveling Kind." Is that right? Um,
Yes, absolutely.
Fast. It's just incredible. I remember learning that when I lived back in Brooklyn days when I was just getting my sort of troubadour chops together. I remember actually one night over the course of a week, I think even kind of perfecting and learning that song. I doubt I could probably get 4 bars into it now, but I remember learning that. Just it was just kind of like one of those songs that when you learned to play it, it was so exhilarating because it was kind of like driving a fast car or something. It was just such a great song, and if you could kind of pull it off, it was just really cool. And then the only other song on that record that I really, I mean, I know the record well, but the only other one that I just really rises to the top, and I always um, think about and associate with him is his version of Rock, Salt, and Nails, which I know several of our other mutual heroes, including Tony Rice and some other luminaries, have recorded that. But Steve Young's version is really stone cold, and it's such a weird and bizarre song. I love that song in the sort of canon of American music just because it's so strange. It's so violent and weird, and it's just such a strange song. And yeah, I love that record. I think I'm grateful that you passed that down to me, kind of, because he's definitely a guy that I would describe as being. I don't know how you feel about this. I don't think he's unknown. Certainly, I don't know if you would describe him as a cult hero or kind of a. He's definitely a known guy, but I think he deserved a lot more exposure than he probably got. But you could probably um, narrate your thoughts about that record a lot better than I could.
Well, I know we're trying to do just brief little hits here of discussion, so you'll have to ring the bell because if I get started on Steve Young, it may take a while to wind it down. I'm a major enthusiast of the man and the music that he left us. He died in March of 2016, way too young. An extraordinary writer and performer as well. And weirdly threaded through my activities, not always often, but in different decades from the early days of this one. This record was released in 1975, and it's one of the great horrific tragedies of this dumpster fire known as a music business that this record is not in print and we don't have it to sell to each other in any format, and that the family of Steve Young is not getting revenues from it by what I think would be very active purchasing of this record. It's one of the greats. And again, I won't besmirch it by saying it's unknown or he's unknown, but with all the rush to some of the other more iconic, so-called iconic names, I think it's a great injustice not to be talking about Steve Young all the time. And this record was visionary when it came out. I mean, you've touched on some of it. The sound of it was incredible. For the nerds, there was two guys that were largely associated with Leo Kottke's recordings, playing on it on dobro and I think maybe on bass, and Eric Gravatt, who is a drummer who played with Weather Report, is on the drums, making that great drum sound that you were commenting on, Aaron, which is I don't even know how that happened. I don't know the backstory on that stuff. It was sort of a upper Midwestern recording. And people have dipped into this record all over the place. His version of Honky Tonk Man was incendiary here. It's a Johnny Horton song, I think, that was around and known to country radio fans, but he laid it out there in kind of a rejuvenated version with the guitar lick and the attitude and the voice. And of course, we all know Dwight Yoakam climbed onto the big stage riding on the back of that song. And other songs on this record are just ridiculous. That Traveling Kind is, of course, miraculous. That sort of drone raga style bluegrass fast guitar lick that backs it up throughout the song is amazing. And what he has to say in it, the couplet that I like is, judge you a man by the clothes he wears, judge I a man by the burden he bears. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. I mean, I think anybody would say so. I bet Jason Isbell would stand on his own coffee table and agree with that. And the front part of the record is a lot of different extraordinary cover versions, and the back part of the record are all these Steve Young songs, and he was light years ahead of a lot of his compatriots. He wrote these sort of cosmic astral traveling, goes deep south kind of songs, you know. A song called Alabama Highway is just unbelievable. I mean, it's just drop you your knees kind of song. And Vision of a Child, written for his own son. We've been together on this earth before is about reincarnation. I think he's relating to maybe knowing a Native American cat. It's just, there's just so much in there. It's just extraordinary. It's just hard to believe. And the performances are just so natural. The recording is so incredible. It's on a little record called Mountain Railroad or Railway. And I think it got sold off to some conglomerate. It was out as a budget CD for a while, and I don't think it's been seen alive and as a thing you could buy new in probably 20, 30 years longer. What's also interesting is the fact it came out in 1975. And to put that in perspective, the famous Rounder 44, J.D. Crowe in the New South with the Tony Rice, Ricky Skaggs, Jerry Douglas, J.D. Crowe recording was 1975. It was a big year for breakthrough in modern American music in acoustic or in Americana. Newgrass Revivals Fly Through the Country, another record that blew the top of all our heads off, was that year. And it was also on Flying Fish. Rounder 44 was J.D. Crowe. Tony Rice's California Autumn, Rebel Records, 1975. Norman Blake's Old and New, Flying Fish Records as well. Brilliant. Billy Gray was on there. I mean, all the great songs that Norman Blake brings to us on those early recordings are just on display on that record. And the one that the mass knows more than any of them is Old and the Way, the all-star sort of bring bluegrass into a new sort of weird corner with Peter Rowan and Garcia and Grisman and Vassar Clements, you know, just ridiculous. Big crop in 75. But Steve Young was sort of was an outlier to that, in my opinion. These guys, the other ones, were all sort of generally in the bluegrass world, and a lot of them knew each other, played on some of the records together, and definitely all knew each other. And there's Steve Young, and he was an interesting cat, you know, kind of got clean and sober, midlife, would like to talk to you about Buddhism and stuff, and wrote extraordinary country songs. Lonesome Ornery Me, that was the gateway to Waylon breaking out of the Nashville countrypolitan, you know, controlled vibe and into the Waylon as we knew him. I think it was right before Honky Tonk Heroes blew the doors off the whole real country music world, and Steve Young had the title cut on the album before it, Lonesome Ornery and Mean, and it was great. I mean, I worked with him a few times and saw him in concert and sat up with him late one night at the Hyatt when he was on a songwriter visit to Greenville with Lucinda Williams and Bo Ramsey and R.B. Morris. And
yeah, those are great shows. I've heard about those.
Oh, man. Anyway, Steve Young, I think everyone should go out and buy his records. There's many of them to choose from. They're extraordinary. This record is just it's got some stuff on here that cannot be equaled. Alabama Highway is just ridiculous. Of course, for those that like the the real dark side of the Southern or the humorous side. You've got the White Trash song. I got the cars in my front yard, but I should fix them up. But the work just seems so hard. I mean, how many places have we driven past that look like that up in the mountains or out in the country? It was
Yeah,
a great Southern record, even though it seemed to have its genesis in the Northern Midwest.
yeah. I think undoubtedly trying to anything we can do. I think both of us are huge fans of his as a songwriter, and his records definitely deserve kind of a renaissance. Some label out there someday, somehow, those records should be more available. I think he's definitely a founding father, like you say, of Americana. I think also people have to kind of remember you're listing off all those great records that are all kind of in our core um, favorites as a family. Um, the Rounder 44 and California Autumn. And I think that really puts in context his, 1975 was a year before The Last Waltz. I mean, people kind of have to remember sometimes with music context of it. I think like it's amazing that he was kind of putting all those styles together and kind of writing at that level as a songwriter. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you said, the way the record sounds. And one thing I wanted to ask about that I didn't know, did you say that a drummer that played with Weather Report played on that record or something?
Yes, Eric Gravatt.
Is he? And the only other thing I couldn't help but kind of feel a little bit like, and I don't know a lot about this person's music either, but I know a modern contemporary that kind of sounds like some of the things you're saying is Sturgill Simpson a little bit, maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know there, but also I feel like what makes Steve Young kind of cool to me personally is kind of that he's a little bit grittier. And I love Dwight Yoakam's version of Honky Tonk Man that you mentioned. It's one of my favorites because it is so polished and slick, and it just sounds that way. It sounds like it was recorded in a studio that was just the best of all times. Whereas the Steve Young version, I love equally because it's so gritty and it kind of has more of an attitude. It's a little grungier. Um,
but he does it with a acoustic guitar and a double bass doubling along with him when he does that turnaround on the way the Honky Tonk Man song goes.
right, but the lick, yeah, which is so iconic, which is, I'm sure, undoubtedly more true, obviously, to the Johnny Horton original version. But yeah, that is definitely a core record in my collection. Anyone who's never heard of Steve Young, I mean, man, it's just he's so brilliant.
Yeah, your comment about the Sturgill thread or vibration is wise too. I think because Steve Young went from these a little bit more folky oriented records. The Seven Bridges Road. I mean, and everybody will say, if oh, that's the Eagles song. No, it's not the damn Eagles song. The only good thing about the Eagles, in my opinion, ever, nothing about them is good, except they covered his song and probably paid off his house or helped his son go through school because Seven Bridges Road is a song they did, which was, written about, the road that leads up to Hank Williams' grave. And
Yeah,
Steve Young also got signed to RCA. Maybe Waylon helped him out. I don't know how it happened, but he did 2 records for RCA that were just brutal early country music. I mean, one of them was called Renegade Picker before we had the Renegade Current Crop. That was the name of the record, and almost No Place to Fall. And he had the full, electric guitar, bass drum, steel guitar setup, for a while he toured and played with that. We saw him do that. And I saw him do that in Atlanta a couple times. It was brilliant. I mean, just
yeah.
dead nut country music,
Well, we'll have to do more on Steve Young sometime and talk
Yes.
more about him. Do another record or something. Or I definitely think we both really just are just total fans of his. So yeah, more on that to come for sure.